Have you ever had that moment when you were watching a series or movie and thought, why am I not learning English while I'm doing this? Well, you are not alone. How many times, while watching our favorite series, the thought comes to mind, if I were learning English from this, it would be the perfect match. Now, imagine that this is not just a vague idea, but a real possibility. The good news is that you can learn English while having fun. I know what you must be thinking, but what do you mean? I can't concentrate on learning and still pay attention to the plot at the same time. And that's where the magic happens. Instead of just watching passively, you will learn practically, taking advantage of what you already love. And the best, it doesn't have to be a boring or forced task. Let's think a little. English is everywhere. Films, series, music, immersion is at your fingertips. Have you ever thought about how this content could be the key to unlocking the next level of your English? Throughout this video, you will discover how to use films and series to improve your vocabulary in a natural, fun, and effective way. Ready to transform the way you learn English. So how are we going to do this? The answer is simple. Instead of focusing only on traditional study methods that may seem boring, you will learn English in a fun and practical way. And guess what? You're already doing this right now when you watch your favorite series and films, but in an inefficient way. Now, let's explore how to optimize this experience. The goal of this video is to show that you can use entertainment to learn English in an engaging way. We're not talking about just watching with English subtitles, but about using immersion in series and films as a true learning tool. At the end of this video, you will understand how to choose content, how to watch it strategically, and how to extract the most learning from each episode or scene. Believe me, this type of learning not only improves vocabulary, but also makes the process of acquiring fluency much easier. And it's not just about words, but about how people actually communicate on a daily basis. We will learn idioms, slang, and everyday language that is used by natives. And if you think this is difficult, don't worry, because I'm going to show you the best way to put this method into practice. Now, how about stopping for a second and reflecting on your relationship with learning English? Are you excited? Or maybe you are a little afraid? Don't worry, I'll show you how to transform this process into something natural and pleasurable. Let's move on to the next chapter and take the first step on this learning journey. Have you ever felt stuck in traditional English learning methods? You know, those giant books, long vocabulary lists, or formal classes where, in the end, it seems like you just memorized a few words without being able to use them in real life. The truth is that many people give up on learning English because of these approaches. After all, who likes to study something that doesn't fit into their daily life, and that seems far from reality? The frustration of not being able to communicate fluidly and naturally is enormous, isn't it? The problem is that learning a language often ends up being seen as a huge burden. Sometimes, it's simple fatigue from trying to follow a method that isn't dynamic or doesn't make sense in your daily life. Of course, theory has its value, but it only becomes useful when applied to real situations. And when you can't see the practical application of what you've learned, the enthusiasm goes away. Worst of all, no matter how hard you try, it may seem that the vocabulary you learn is not effectively engraved in your memory. Besides, who doesn't love the idea of doing things in a fun way and without all the pressure of studying? That's where the problem comes in. Studying English in a format that doesn't engage you ends up making everything tiring, tasteless, and without purpose. But what if there was a way to learn that was part of your lifestyle, without being an obligation? A way that was fun and didn't make you feel like you were simply studying? Believe me, this approach is possible, and it is closer than you think. The importance of motivation in studying 800 words. Now, let's talk a little about motivation. Have you ever stopped to think about why traditional learning methods are so demotivating for many people? This happens because the process is monotonous and doesn't connect with the things that really generate interest. When you try to study something that doesn't excite you, it's easy to feel discouraged and even think that it's not for you. Lack of motivation is one of the main reasons why so many people fail to achieve fluency in English, even after years of study. Learning needs to be something enjoyable, not a chore. To truly learn and retain the language, you need to be immersed in situations that stimulate your senses and create deeper connections. This is one of the reasons why films and series can be so effective. They capture your attention and engage you in a way that traditional methods cannot. Imagine you're watching an action-packed scene from the Avengers, and suddenly you hear an expression in English that you've never heard before. You feel motivated to look up its meaning and then use the word or phrase in conversation with someone. See how exciting and practical this type of learning is. When you are motivated, you don't notice time passing. You are so immersed in the story and the characters' conversations that English ends up being learned almost automatically, without that exhausting effort. The secret is to find ways of learning that fuel your interest and connect with your lifestyle. Films and series offer this in a natural way, without the rigidity of conventional methodologies. What you will learn from this video is how to take advantage of these opportunities strategically, turning each episode into a chance to expand your vocabulary and improve your fluency. So, now that we have identified the problem of demotivation and the difficulty of maintaining focus with traditional methods, let's move on to the solution. Are you ready to discover how you can transform your English learning using something you already enjoy? Let's do it. Now that we've identified the problems with traditional learning methods and the importance of motivation, it's time to present the solution. And this solution is much more fun than you imagine. The secret is to transform entertainment into a powerful learning tool. That's right, films and series can be your allies on the journey to improving your English. But how exactly does this work? When you watch films and series, you are not just seeing scenes and hearing dialogue. You are, in fact, immersed in an environment where the language is used naturally, with all its nuances, slang, idiomatic expressions, and cultural context. This is something that traditional teaching methods often fail to offer. Learning from films and series allows you to hear the language being spoken in the same way native speakers would use it in everyday situations. Furthermore, films and series put you in contact with a much more varied and rich vocabulary than word lists or textbooks. They cover everything, from formal expressions in drama films to the more colloquial slang and words in comedy series. And best of all, you learn all of this without realizing it, because you are absorbing the language naturally, while having fun with the story. The magic is in the context. What you learn in a grammar book or dictionary may be important, but it's the words and expressions used in real contexts that really make the difference. For example, imagine you are watching an episode of Friends. The expression "hit the sack," which means go to sleep, is something you probably wouldn't encounter in a traditional class. But in the context of the series, you learn it intuitively, understanding exactly what it means and how to use it. Another benefit is that, when watching films and series, you are also training your listening, which is essential for improving fluency. Hearing English spoken by native speakers, with different accents, intonations, and rhythms, helps to improve your listening comprehension in a practical way. You get used to the ways words are actually pronounced, and that's something a grammar book could never teach. Now that we understand how films and series are an excellent tool for learning English, let's explore the benefits of contextual learning in more depth. The great advantage here is that, by learning in context, you acquire vocabulary in a much more effective way. When you learn a word in its context of use, it becomes much easier to memorize and use that word in the future. This happens because the human brain tends to associate information with images and scenarios, which makes learning more meaningful. When you see a character using an expression in a movie, you not only learn the word, but you also learn the situation in which it is used. This makes it easier to retain and use later. For example, let's say you're watching The Office, and you hear the character Michael Scott saying "that's what she said" in conversation. This expression is not just a combination of words, but a phrase used in specific contexts. When you learn to use it, you are not just memorizing isolated words, but learning how and when to use them spontaneously. This is extremely useful for anyone who wants to speak like a native and use English in the real world, without sounding artificial or robotic. Furthermore, series and films offer constant exposure to different types of English: formal English, informal English, business English, academic English, colloquial English, and even English full of slang. In a single episode, you can hear a mix of all these styles, which enriches your vocabulary even more. And the most interesting thing, you learn the language effortlessly. Instead of having to memorize lists of words, you learn words as they are used in the narrative, without realizing you are studying. This creates a lighter and more natural way of learning, which contributes to your motivation and continuity in the process. This contextual learning is not just a benefit, it is one of the most effective ways to truly acquire fluency. By hearing, seeing, and using the language in real-life situations, you internalize the language in a much deeper way than with traditional study methods. Now, just put this into practice and choose the right films and series to start. Now that you know the power of learning from films and series, it's time to get into the practical part, how to use it strategically in your daily life. To learn effectively, it's not enough to just press play and hope that English sticks in your head. You need to be intentional about how you watch and interact with content. The first tip is to start with subtitles, but in a smart way. When watching a film or series, put the subtitles in English, not Portuguese. This will help you make the association between spoken words and their spellings, as well as strengthening your listening comprehension. You can start watching with subtitles while focusing on reading and listening simultaneously. And, as you gain confidence, try watching without subtitles, just trusting your understanding. Another important strategy is not to get caught up in an entire episode at once. Instead of marathoning several hours at a time, divide the content. Watch a portion of an episode, then pause to reflect on what you learned. Take the opportunity to make quick notes on words or phrases that you find interesting. This helps reinforce vocabulary and, most importantly, gives room for repetition. This type of break between viewing sessions makes learning more effective and less tiring. When you come across new words, write them down. Don't be afraid to pause and look for the meaning of something you don't understand. However, don't stop there. Try using these words and expressions in your own sentences. If you hear a word in a scene, think of situations where you could use it in your everyday life. By doing this, the vocabulary begins to gain life and context in your own life, making it easier to remember and use. Also, replay scenes that contain interesting dialogue or words you want to learn. Go back a few times to the scenes that caught your attention the most. This helps to reinforce not only vocabulary but also pronunciation. English is a language full of sounds that can be challenging for those just starting out. Repeating sentences and trying to imitate the way native speakers speak is an excellent way to improve your pronunciation and fluency. One strategy that many people underestimate is watching the same content multiple times. This may seem repetitive, but it is incredibly effective. Every time you watch it, you pick up different nuances, new words and expressions. Additionally, your brain begins to process words in a more fluid way, making the experience more natural. Finally, try to vary the content. Watch different types of programs with different language styles: action films, comedies, documentaries, and dramas. This exposes you to different registers of language and prepares you to understand English in different contexts. Now that you have an idea of how to watch strategically, let's talk about the content itself. The choice of series and films is crucial for learning to be interesting and effective. Some programs offer more advanced and formal vocabulary, while others can be perfect for learning slang and everyday expressions. Let's explore some popular options and how each of them can help you improve your English. Comedies are a great starting point for those just starting out. Series like Friends and The Big Bang Theory are full of simple dialogues, jokes, and everyday expressions. The best thing about watching this type of series is that the lines tend to be clearer and more direct, in addition to presenting a wide variety of everyday situations. In Friends, for example, you learn not only vocabulary, but also the way people actually talk to each other, something essential for anyone who wants to communicate fluently. For those who already have an intermediate or more advanced level, dramas like Breaking Bad or The Crown can be extremely useful. These series not only have more complex dialogue, they also expose you to different types of English, depending on the context of the story and the characters. Breaking Bad, for example, mixes technical vocabulary with more informal slang, while The Crown features more formal English with an advanced vocabulary, suitable for those looking to expand their repertoire. For those looking for more technical vocabulary, or vocabulary linked to the business world, Suits is an excellent option. The series revolves around lawyers and offers a wide range of legal terms, formal expressions, and vocabulary used in a corporate environment. Watching this type of content will expose you to professional English, essential if you are thinking about using the language for more specific purposes, such as an international career. If you like action, films like The Avengers or Mad Max, Fury Road are not only exciting, but also great for learning English with modern slang and expressions, as well as technical vocabulary. Even though they are action films, the interactions between the characters offer good opportunities to learn English used in faster and more direct dialogues. We can't forget animations, like The Simpsons or Rick and Morty. These animated series are not only fun, but they also offer an excellent opportunity to learn English in a relaxed way. With captivating characters and creative dialogue, animations are a great choice for learning vocabulary in a lighter and more fun way. These examples are just the beginning. The important thing is to vary the types of content you watch according to your interests. This will not only help you learn different styles of English, but it will also keep your motivation up, because you will be learning while having fun. Now that you know how to choose and watch the right content, the next step is how to review and practice what you've learned. This is essential so that the vocabulary and expressions really remain engraved in your memory. Repetition is the key. There is nothing more effective for learning something than constant practice. But how to apply this in the context of films and series? Simple rewatch scenes that you found interesting or that contain new words and expressions. Repeating the content will reinforce the retention of words and phrases, as well as improving your listening comprehension and pronunciation. A powerful technique you can use is spaced repetition. Instead of simply watching content once, review it in progressively longer intervals of time. For example, watch a scene on the first day, then re-watch it on the third, then on the seventh. This helps to consolidate what you have learned and makes the information stick in long-term memory. Additionally, create a list of new words and expressions that you learned during your movie or series sessions. Use a flashcard app or simply write them down in a notebook and review them regularly. Try using these words in your everyday life, in conversations with friends, or even alone. The more you use what you learn, the easier it will be to incorporate this new vocabulary into your repertoire. Even though you know how fun and effective learning English by watching movies and series can be, you may eventually come across some challenges along the way. One of the biggest obstacles is discouragement. It may seem exciting at first, but over time the learning process becomes more difficult or even seems stagnant. This is completely normal. Learning a language is not linear, and everyone goes through ups and downs. The secret is not to let discouragement stop you from continuing. One of the ways to deal with this is to create small, achievable goals. For example, instead of thinking about learning fluent English, focus on more immediate goals, such as learning 10 new words this week, or understanding one new expression per episode. These shorter goals help keep motivation high and a feeling of constant progress, which is essential to keep moving forward. Another very common challenge is lack of time. With the rush of everyday life, it can seem difficult to fit in English learning sessions. But the good news is that you can learn while doing other things. For example, put on an episode of your favorite series while you do chores at home, or listen to English language movies while commuting to work. These small moments of immersion are great for increasing your vocabulary without taking up significant time in your day. Also, remember that learning doesn't have to happen in long marathons. Small doses of daily study are much more effective than sporadic, intense sessions. If you watch a 20-minute episode and absorb a few words and expressions, that's already progress. Consistency is key. One effective technique is to use micro-learning, learning in small but frequent chunks. For example, instead of trying to study English for an hour at a time, how about studying for 10 or 15 minutes several times throughout the day? You can use flashcards, write down new words while watching an episode, or simply repeat phrases out loud. These small moments of practice throughout the day will add up and bring results. Now that we've talked about how to deal with discouragement and lack of time, it's time to address how to keep your motivation high throughout the process. The key to this is making learning fun and part of your routine. As we have already discussed, learning English with films and series is a much more engaging way to acquire new vocabulary and expressions. That, in itself, is an excellent motivator. However, it is also important to remember that motivation needs to be nurtured. So, set rewards for yourself. For example, you might decide that after watching an episode and learning 10 new words, you will treat yourself to something you like a piece of chocolate, or watch your next favorite episode. These rewards help create a positive cycle, where learning is associated with something pleasurable. Additionally, get involved in the community. There are many online communities of people who, like you, are learning English in a fun way with movies and series. Joining these communities and sharing your progress can be a great source of motivation. Exchanging tips with other learners, or even forming study groups, can bring a new level of engagement and encourage continuity. You can also create challenges for yourself. For example, choose a specific theme each week to focus on. In the first week, learn expressions from action movies. In the second week, comedy slang, and so on. This keeps learning dynamic and interesting, and at the same time, you will feel more confident and excited to continue. Remember that, like any learning process, the journey can be long, but with the right approach, you will realize that learning English with films and series can be not only effective, but also extremely enjoyable. By keeping your motivation high and your goals clear, learning will be a fun journey, not a burden. Now that we've explored how to learn English the fun way with movies and series, how about taking a look at some success stories? Sometimes seeing other people's progress can be the encouragement you need to take the next step. So, let's share some examples of people who really transformed their English using this method. Maria, for example, always had difficulties with English. She tried to study in a traditional way, with books and exercises, but she could never engage enough. One day, she decided to try something different. Start watching series and films in English, with subtitles in the same language. At first, she only watched light comedies, like Friends and How I Met Your Mother, focusing on learning the simplest expressions. Over time, Maria began to understand the jokes and slang better, and, most importantly, she felt more comfortable hearing the language in a natural way. After a few months, Maria noticed that her vocabulary was much richer. She felt more confident speaking English, and was even able to hold a conversation in English with a foreign coworker without feeling lost. Maria's secret was consistency. She made it a daily habit, watching at least 20 minutes of English content every day, writing down new words and repeating phrases that sounded interesting. The process was not immediate, but constancy and motivation were her greatest allies in achieving the desired level of fluency. Another example is Peter. Pedro has always been passionate about action films, so he dedicated himself to watching films like The Avengers and Mad Max in English, focusing on informal expressions and vocabulary used in action films. Pedro's main difficulty was the speed at which the lines happened in these films, but he knew that repetition was the key. He watched some scenes several times, pausing to repeat the lines out loud and absorb the new words. Over time, Pedro realized that he began to understand the English spoken in the action scenes more quickly. Not only that, but he was also able to apply expressions and slang he learned in his daily conversations. Pedro felt that his listening comprehension was significantly better, and he no longer felt lost in rapid dialogue. As a result, his confidence in speaking English has greatly increased. Not only did he learn new vocabulary, but he also began to think in English, something that previously seemed like an insurmountable barrier. These stories demonstrate the power of learning through films and series, but they also show that the key to success lies in consistency and a strategic approach. There are no magic shortcuts, but the process can be much more fun and efficient than you think. The impact of learning English with films and series goes beyond a simple increase in vocabulary. It can transform the way you relate to the language, making English not just something you study, but something that is part of your everyday life. The stories we just shared are just a few examples of how effective this method has been. The great advantage of learning with audio-visual content is that it offers a richer and more immersive experience, which is difficult to replicate with traditional methods. When you start using expressions you learned from your favorite movies in your daily conversations, you will not only notice that your vocabulary has increased, but you will also begin to understand nuances of the language that previously went unnoticed. Words that previously seemed difficult or complicated start to fit naturally into your speech, and slang or expressions you learned from your favorite characters start to sound more natural to you. Furthermore, this type of learning brings greater confidence to those who often feel insecure when speaking English. If you can understand complicated dialogue in a movie or series, why wouldn't you be able to use those words or expressions in a real conversation? This learning method prepares you for everyday situations, at work, at school, or even on international trips, in a much more efficient way than traditional methods. Another important point is that, when watching films and series, you are constantly being exposed to different forms of English, including accents, verb tenses, and sentence structures that are widely used in real conversations. This constant contact with the language helps reinforce your listening comprehension and create a solid foundation for your fluency. This real impact on fluency and vocabulary is one of the biggest benefits of learning English with entertainment. Not only do you acquire new words, but you also learn how to use them in the right context, like natives would. And best of all, you're having fun while doing it. Learning English with films and series turns studying into a pleasurable and rewarding experience, without the pressure of having to memorize everything at once. Now that we've gone through all the stages of learning English with films and series, it's time to recap the main benefits of this method and reinforce how much it can transform your journey to fluency. Throughout this video, we saw how you can learn English in an effective and fun way, using the films and series you already love. The most important thing is that you are not just learning vocabulary or grammar in isolation, but rather absorbing the language in its natural context. First, we talk about motivation. When you learn English by watching your favorite series and films, you are involved in a much more dynamic process than that imposed by traditional study methods. This not only keeps learning interesting, but also ensures that you feel motivated to continue, because, deep down, you are having fun while you learn. Next, we address the importance of learning in a contextual way. By watching films and series, you will learn vocabulary in real situations, which makes it easier to memorize and use words naturally in your daily life. Instead of memorizing lists of words, you're learning how and when to use them, which is essential for anyone who wants to communicate effectively. Another fundamental point is immersion. By making English part of your everyday life, you become accustomed to the rhythm, pronunciation, and even the different accents of the language. This improves your listening comprehension, expands your vocabulary, and, most importantly, makes English something natural, no longer a challenge to be faced. Furthermore, we saw how to deal with the typical challenges of those learning a new language: discouragement and lack of time. Learning English with films and series is a practical and affordable solution. It is not necessary to dedicate hours at a time to study. Small moments of learning, 10 to 20 minutes a day, can have a significant impact if they are consistent. Finally, we explore the real impact of learning English with films and series through examples of people who managed to improve their fluency in a practical and fun way. These stories demonstrate that, with the right approach, anyone can reach a more advanced level of English without feeling overwhelmed or unmotivated. Now that you have the tools and knowledge you need to start learning English in a more engaging and fun way, what are you waiting for? It's time to put it all into practice and enjoy the best of entertainment to improve your English. Remember, English learning need not be a weight. When watching movies and series, you are not only having fun, but also acquiring the vocabulary and skills you will need to communicate with confidence. The key is to be consistent and enjoy every moment of immersion. It is not necessary to marathon the content at once. 20 minutes a day are enough to see long-term results. I know that at first it may seem difficult or even strange to think of learning English this way, but believe me, as you start watching your movies and series with a look more close to vocabulary and expressions, you will realize how it becomes automatic. You will start listening to new words and understand dialogues more naturally, and over time, it will be able to apply everything you have learned to your own conversations. So, now it's with you. Select your favorite series, place the subtitles in English, and start learning in a fun and practical way. Start gradually, but be consistent. Don't cover too much. Every new word you learn is a step closer to fluency. Remember that instead of studying, you are just watching and having fun while improving your English. And this, no doubt, is the most pleasurable way to learn. If you liked this content, be sure to like it and subscribe to the channel for more English learning tips in a fun and practical way. And of course, share this video with friends who also want to improve English in a relaxed way. Together we can make English learning accessible, motivating, and, above all, fun. Now that you have the strategies for learning English with movies and series and knows how to integrate this into your daily life, I will give you some tools that can make this process even easier and more efficient. These tools will help you enhance your learning and ensure that you are making the most of the audio-visual content you are consuming. The first essential tool is YouTube. There are thousands of videos with English subtitles in both educational channels and entertainment content. Using YouTube allows you to choose the content that best suits your tastes and level of English. In addition, YouTube offers the functionality of accelerating or slowing down the video speed, which may be useful when you start to understand content, but you still can't track the normal speech speed perfectly. Netflix and Amazon Prime Video are also amazing platforms for English learning. They offer not only the option of English subtitles, but also a wide range of series and movies with different difficulties of difficulty. Also, you can adjust audio to the original language without worrying about automatic translations that are often inaccurate. One tip is to start with easier and gradually increase difficulty according to your vocabulary and hearing understanding. If you want to focus specifically on learning vocabulary and expressions, Anki is an excellent tool. Anki is a flashcard application that uses the space of spacing. You can create cards for the new words you have learned by watching movies and series and reviewing these words at specific intervals, which significantly improves retention. Anki is free and available for various platforms, making vocabulary learning even more dynamic. Also, if you want to learn even more immersively, a great option is Duolingo, which offers a fun and interactive approach to English learning. Although it does not replace learning with movies and series, Duolingo is a good way to complement its vocabulary and reinforce grammatical structures, especially at the beginning of learning. A valuable tip is to use podcast apps like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, where you can hear podcasts about topics of your English interest. This is a great way to improve your auditory understanding, especially if you prefer to learn while moving, during travel, exercises, or homework. Finally, Linguist and Memrise are platforms that help improve vocabulary in an interactive and practical way, based on their language experience, which is perfect for those who want to learn English in a more personalized way. These tools, along with the regular practice of watching series and movies, will form a solid foundation for your English learning. With the right tools, you will be on the right track to become more fluent and confident in the language.